You're listening to Science and Saucery, a show dedicated to exploring innovative minds and adding life to your years. And now, your host, scientist Rick Croneiss.
Welcome. Glad to have you here today. This is another much requested interview with someone who goes way back in terms of my getting involved in health span, and that's Wim Hof. Most of you have heard about him by now, but Wim is an extraordinary human being. And what's extraordinary about Wim is not so much what he can do, but the idea that he really focuses on teaching us how to do it. Wim has done some pretty amazing feats in the past. In 2007, he climbed past the death zone on Mount Everest. This is 6,500 meters wearing nothing but shorts, no shirt. In 2009, he completed a full marathon in the polar circle in Finland in temperatures at around minus 20 Celsius or minus 4 F, dressed in nothing but shorts. He finished in 5 hours and 25 minutes. It doesn't even stop there, because in 2011, after we met, he ran a full marathon in the Namib Desert, and he didn't even drink water. So these feats have sort of come to define Wim, but what I hope to do today is hang another side of Wim on, because we got to know each other back when I did the crazy idea of using cold to modify my metabolism and to burn more calories. You heard me talking to Tim Ferriss, but at that same time, it was really only Wim and I that were talking about this mild cold stress. Nobody else really took what we were doing seriously. And Wim and I became friends online and then through phone calls. But more importantly, I visited Wim, and we got together several times when he came to the United States as well. And we explored the idea of how could we take this to the next level. And so I think an important time for me, because Wim continued to push me to be more skeptical. You would think people like this are always trying to validate their ideas in a way of pushing, I know it's right, I know it's right, I know it's right. But what's really interesting about Wim is that often when we got together, he wanted to know where the mistake was being made, like what are we seeing? And what's so interesting about the clients that lose weight and are doing it consistently or extended time without food and what biomarkers are and mild cold stress is you can't make this stuff up. I mean, when somebody's in an ice bucket full of ice and there's a stopwatch running, everybody can't do that out of the box. Everybody can't just automatically do that, but many people can learn to do it. And hopefully we'll get into some of these things. Even Wim has had huge success at what would be kind of a top-down approach from the autoimmune system, something we thought not to be within our control. But Wim can not only do it, he's taught other people to do it and documented that with science. So I can't wait to hear some of the new things that he's done. And this ought to be fun to go through this and see how this conversation plays out. So with that, I'd love to invite my friend, Wim, otherwise known as the Iceman. Welcome, Wim, to Science and Saucery. It's good to have you here with us today.
Right on, me too. It's a long time friendship we have going on. But, you know, as it is and as it goes, science beats it all. There is no speculation about it. And we are going to talk science and from science to sense.
Yes. And you know what's really fun is that a decade ago when we first got in contact, not many people really believed in what we were talking about. It was more like a sort of a circus act. And isn't it amazing when we look back now over this 10 years how much has changed?
Wow, yeah. What is it? Well, for people who don't go follow the mainstream, capable of following the mainstream, but think, hey man, there must be more than this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look into it, and they see more, and those are then becoming visionaries. There is a reality awaiting, which is more than what we are experiencing. And we are like man standing up and saying, hey, man, we have to awaken to more than what meets the eye right now, or what we understand with our existent paradigm. Because look at the world. All the economies, all these military big societies built up with so much power, suddenly comes a little unseen predator, and nobody knows what to do.
Right.
Nobody was prepared for this.
Right.
But it goes like a virus. If you are weak, virus is able to come in. If you are weak, bacteria is able to come in. When you are mentally not okay, depression sets in. So we got to stand up and show some ways out, some exits, because we are not making use what Mother Nature provided us with, is to battle any external stressor upon our body and upon our mind. We are able to cope with that. And for that, we were talking 10 years ago, and now we talk again.
Yeah.
And then we see what have been your insights. I'm most interested in your itinerary, what you have found. Of course, I heard of you here and there about the thermogenesis, but let's renew this acquaintance and then have a whole audience listening whilst we are doing this.
Yeah. And so let's start in the beginning, where one of the most exciting features about our meeting and talking to you is that, unlike a lot of people who display extraordinary kinds of abilities, your point was, hey, we have this. We have this. In fact, we came up with the find the extraordinary in everyone. We found a way to do that. Talk a little bit about that, the fact that this isn't just something, and we're talking specifically mild cold stress and immune response. This is something you really have always believed could be taught and learned.
Oh, absolutely. Not only that, I do have to respect you for having detected that power, that underlying current, that underlying power in everybody, and trying to find ways to make people access into that. Make it beneficial for everybody, for yourself, for everybody, at the same time, something humanly good. And you knew me before I proved it in science that me, the Iceman, was capable, say, of inoculating a E. coli bacteria injected, which was not done according to science and medical science in medical history überhaupt. It was a thought of impossible for humans to fight off consciously through influencing into the innate immune system. We could not control that. And that now is the damaging factor with COVID-19 is the innate immune system, the overreaction, the cytokine storm, which is the damaging factor. And we have shown in 2014, not only the Iceman, I said, hey man, I'm not the only one. I am able to train a group of people after thousands of people doing the same endotoxemia model experiment. Now, 12 people suddenly, after a couple of days of training, were capable of what those thousands of people could not do with that experiment. And that was inoculating, suppressing the inflammatory markers responsible for fever, headaches, etc. The damaging factor in COVID, in virus and bacteria bacteria is mostly the overreaction of the innate immune system. And we showed it in 2014. And that is 3 years after I met you. So I have to respect your belief and your vision from that point of view. But 3 years later, I showed very clearly in science as the first one in scientific history of medical science to tap into the innate immune system, into the autonomic nervous system. Not me, the group of people I trained. And that means everybody is able to do that. And that through mild stressor of cold exposure or extreme cold exposure. It does not matter. In the end, it is the cold is a doorway to train deeper physiology than thought of possible by science. And we advocated that. And that made us for allies for all times.
Yeah, and let me explain this to the audience a little bit so they get the context. So Wim had talked a lot, and one of the things that Wim and I share in common is that he always wants to try to demonstrate it. He really believes, he's skeptical of his own things, and a lot of people, just like I was, a lot of people aren't skeptical, but in this case, what happened is some endotoxins, which are basically sort of the remnant, the non-lethal remnants of a bacteria, were injected into these people in a controlled setting in a hospital, and through the training that Wim did before, they were able to suppress the fever. They were able to suppress the nausea. These are responses that your body normally would have. And what Wim was just saying, this idea that a lot of times it's our body over-responding, overreacting. And in fact, if someone wants to think about an allergy somewhat is the idea of your body panicking in the presence of something it can normally handle. And what Wim talked about even in those days, and then demonstrated, like he's saying, in 2014, is that we do have a degree of control. And of course, neither one of us are saying that you can fight everything all the time. But the fact of the matter is that so many things that are common, one can actually do a good job with suppressing those responses just through this kind of training. Does that cover it pretty good, Wim?
Yes, no, absolutely. And I'm cautious not to say, we have found the cure for everything.
Right.
Just take it as a pill, because then it's done. Come to me, buy the pill, and it's all done.
Yeah.
No, those are the pharmaceuticals. Right. We are no pharmaceuticals. We are no pill. We're advocating something based on science. And it shows that we are able to do more than we thought possible. Now, the whole industry of what is happening right now on vaccines, etc., is based on our incapacity, non-capacity, so the absence of our natural capability to fight off virus and or bacteria or prevent therefrom by ourselves, by simple breathing techniques and cold exposure. We have to explain what cold exposure and what breathing techniques are capable of doing, because the paradigm is still that we are dependent on medicines, on pills, on hospital care, and all those things in the degree as we do right now. It should be a lot lesser degree of dependency. We have so much more innate capacity awaiting if we only awaken to it. First of all, we have to know the facts. What are we capable of doing more than we think now in mainstream possible? So here we begin and talk again about, say, cold exposure. Your technique, your way, your experience. You take it on, hit it off right now.
Well, I would say before we even get into the details of technique, because so many people read about our stuff online, I really want to get into the human element of our connection and some of the stories that we talked about. So very quickly, I found out about you after watching the Discovery Channel Superhuman Quest for Future Fantastic, where you had run barefooted this half marathon in Finland. So I saw that documentary, and at the same time, I was doing this crazy cold stuff, at least what everybody was saying was crazy cold. I wasn't doing it to try to create a following or do anything, just like you weren't. I was just using thermodynamics and saying, wait, if the body burns more calories in cold versus warm, I was trying to take advantage of it. It was a silly trick at the time. But then when we met, what was really interesting is that your path into this was pretty interesting. And I want to reflect on one specific instant and have you hopefully recreate this conversation, because I think you can. But it was dark one night. We were in your apartment and we were just talking. I visited Wim in Amsterdam, and we spent a week together, and we hung out and talked a lot. But very specifically, I remember you telling me about this rehearsal for the 50-meter underwater swim in Finland. And you were talking to me very quietly in the room, and it was dark, and you were painting a mental picture of what went down when you were going there to do that and what happened. Can you repaint that calm picture and those details of what happened that day?
Yeah, sure. And it was a nice, I always remember, it was quite memorable, our being together then. Yeah, it was nice. It was good. It set a foundation. Okay, here it comes. One day before my world record attempt to swim 50 meters in Finland, beyond the polar circle, under a cap of ice of, say, a yard thick, that's like 90 centimeters thick, I wanted to do the rehearsal. I wanted to make sure everything was, there. I was there. Because the other day, I got to swim the whole distance, breath hold in my shorts, and there is no way to get out, because there is it's like glass. Ice is like glass, and then a yard thick. There's no way. Your thoughts are. You can't think of. No, I gotta swim the distance. That's what you think. So, I wanted to go into the rehearsal, and then the people said, you can swim at 5 meters or 20 meters, and then it's okay. And then we see that, no, I want to swim the whole distance, because tomorrow I got to do that. I want to build the technique, the confidence that I'm able to do that. Because I never had done that before. Because who's going to swim 50 meters when he is alone under the ice? Nobody's going to do that. Maybe seals do that, but I'm no seal. So, I'm not. The thing is, there I am with a couple of guys. And I'm ready. I go into this breathing. I charge up myself, blow off the carbon dioxide. All controlled. I'm in the water, taking on the last breaths. Really feel charged. I take it in, last breath fully in, and there I push myself underneath the ice, and then I go horizontally. So vertically I go down a couple of meters, and then I go horizontal to the other way. Now, what I did not have had on, which I should have had, was the goggles. And my eyes, after 35 meters, like 26 strokes, I had it counted, calculated. Every stroke is 1 meter 20. It's like 1 yard and, 1.5 yard. That's one stroke. Everybody has a different distance taken with his personal stroke, because everybody's physiology is different. So I had it calculated. I need 42 strokes to get to 49 meters, 60 centimeters is when I can see the hole clearly. But after 26 of those strokes, my cornea apparently froze. I'm no seal. So it froze. I'm a human, and a human has cornea. And if you swim under the ice, you will be affected by the cold. The cornea is not built to keep on visually capacitated underneath in that cold. Mm-hmm. It's not. And I found out there a blur. It all became a blur. So I could not see the hole, I could not see the itinerary, I could not see the line, could not see anything. And I passed the hole. The thing happened at that moment that I lost it. I lost my consciousness, and I got into fight and flight, into brainstem, survival, pure survival. In the pure survival, there are no words. There's no thinking. It's just pure survival. So I shut down. I was just surviving. And when I regained consciousness, when it came back to me, my consciousness, so that's my thinking brain again, I was on stroke number 48. That means after 26 strokes, I lost it. I lost my conscious control. I went into survival. And 22 strokes later, it came to my consciousness, 48, 6 back, because 42 was really imprinted in me. I had it all calculated, and that means 6. So I took 6 strokes from there back. And then trying to find the hole with my hands on the ice. 6 strokes, that is 54 strokes. Then I went, there was no hole. So I went automatically. You don't think at those moments. You just 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. And 6 strokes when you have no air, when you are breath held under the ice, is a long time. And I had to do 6 strokes there, that way, 6 strokes that way, 6 strokes that way, 6 strokes that way. I don't know how many strokes, but in the end, I swam 130 yards. Is when I lost it. When my visual became as big as a pipe,
right,
in front of my eyes.
Your eyesight came in.
Yes, my eyesight came in. Yes, the tunnel vision, and then slowly I began to my strokes began to wear off, and I almost fell asleep. Is when a diver grabbed me by the ankle and brought me back to the 50-meter hole. I was conscious, but my energy was completely out of me. And I was conscious, he could drag me, but that was all. And then when I got out, the first thing when I reached the surface of the water was, take on the breath, and just a couple of breaths, and you're back. Thing is, I conquered the fear of our concept of what is death right over there. I had done, apparently, this breathing before, charging myself so much up and all consciously that I was able not to feel agony of drowning or the whole way long until I fall asleep. Like, it was almost nice to fall asleep. I was not drowning. So what I mean to say is that if we control the breath, we are able to control that what we fear most, is to lose control at the time of death. And I found out there I've conquered my fear of the concept of what is death. It's a sort of a subconscious thing. And so that is just one of the situations wherein I was taught a life's lesson, which is not in the books.
Right.
And I'm a searcher for the soul. I'm a searcher for all there is. I think everybody has got the birthright to find out what the soul is all about, what science is all about, what common sense is to make us happy, strong, and healthy. Because the rest, really, I think the rest is bullshit. And I don't want the bullshit. I want to be in control as a human to teach my children happiness, strength, and health. Here they are. You do whatever you do with it, but here it is. It's no religion. There is no dogma. Divinity should be part of our lives everywhere in the world.
Yeah. And let me explain just so that we bring some more science in here. But, most people don't realize that it's really the buildup of carbon dioxide in your blood system that causes you to gasp and feel like you're out of air. And one of the things Wim does before with his breathing exercises is that he's purging a lot of that CO2. This is hyperventilation, super saturating the blood with the oxygen side. And what happens in our transport system as our lungs take oxygen in and then it's transported to the tissue, or it's brought out into the bloodstream, it's that very small pH change that makes the hemoglobin grab onto the oxygen or release it, or in the case of CO2, getting that CO2 out of the system. And so what he's saying a little bit about the sort of the panic side is that because he started ahead of the game and had enough, just think about it as CO2 buffer to be able to take that in. By the time he got there, he was relaxed. He wasn't gasping, because a gasp would have probably meant sure death at that point. Once you get to those reflexes, you take the water in, and at that point, there's really not much you can do. So, it was just instance from there. And I do remember you telling me that night, and it was very eerie because he just said those exact words, because I have it written in my notebook. This was the moment that I feel like I finally learned and conquered death in a moment. And another story you told me that I also think would be neat is that, well, actually, I'll tell you a funny story from my perspective. So imagine, if you will, everything you guys all know about Wim Hof today, the image of Wim Hof, et cetera. Well, I knew a lot about that then because I was studying mild cold stress. I was studying the effect of cold on the body. I had so much respect for what he had been able to do, that this was naturally. I knew that I had overcome so much of my ability to tolerate cold. And when we emailed back and forth and spoke on the phone, a lot of our situation was similar. I didn't go to the extreme of the ice, but mainly to think about it, our bodies tend to panic in the face of cold to bring on this CO2 over to the cold. It panics, and what it does is it restricts the capillaries and the blood vessels in your extremities. And so the idea is to bring the blood to the core, and you protect the core. You never get frostbite of the head. You get it of the toes, the feet, like he saw, the eyes or the ears, these little extremities, because the body's trying to protect the core. And one of the things that people don't recognize is that the concept of tolerating these extreme colds and not getting frostbite or not using circulation really is a requirement of relaxation. So when Wim is talking about this idea of being calm and relaxing, you have to do that. And I got to the point where I could relax and I could make my hands start to get very warm, or I could make my feet very warm. I had this feeling that shot up over my neck to the top of my head. I can't explain it. And what's really interesting is even when I had a calorimeter, when they were setting up, if you listen to the episode with Kevin Jessup, by doing this, I was actually changing my respiratory exchange ratio, the ratio of CO2 to oxygen. They were changing. Now, how exactly that works, neither Wim and I really know specifically. We have good guesses, and we've tried to do that, but I wanted to stress upon this idea of going from this stressful situation to what he said, the fight or flight, to this moment of trying to relax, because relax is part of that survival. And this goes through a lot of things in life. But first we were going to the grocery store and we're walking. And Wim, as you guys have always known with him out, he's animated, he's fun. We had a blast. We were going to the grocery store to buy food, and we're walking down the road. It's February in Amsterdam, and it's cold. And then all of a sudden, Wim turns to me on the street, and he says, look at that. I'm the Iceman. I got a coat on, and the guy from Alabama, from the South, is sitting here in a t-shirt. And so he like takes his, do you remember doing this? He takes his coat off and immediately says, we've got to feel the outside. We have to feel the temperature. Well, after that, we walked on and we went to a lake or a river, and I can't remember what. And you told me this story that starts with the cold freezer and ends in this plunge that you took. Can you recall that? Like, that's kind of your beginning. Mine was doing these silly shiver walks. Can you tell that story a little bit?
Yeah, in the freezer. I want to go a little bit before. You were saying in this response now that we maybe not fully know what is going on into these mechanisms, but let me tell you, I just did in Michigan my last study with in psychiatry, Wayne State University, brain scans, wherein I show, and this is called interoception, top-down regulation, which was unknown to science. In science, humans could do. It was unknown and unprecedented. So there they got me in a brain scan and being exposed to stress through cold ice water upon my skin, just using my mind, my thought, the power of my intention, was able to make the skin temperature not going down.
Yes.
While being exposed with ice water on the skin. And you recalled, you said, hey, my hands became warm, I can influence my feet. We all can do this. And you know what it is? We are able to tap through going into the cold, into the survival mechanisms, which is the hypothalamus, the amygdala, the epiphysis, but also the periaqueductal gray hemisphere, which is the spot of opioids, and there is an opioid crisis is going on. We can't do anything about it. Hey, let me tell you, the opioids robustly activating at will is possible. And with that, euphoria as well. So those are the cannabinoids. We are talking the endocannabinoid system, which is connected almost to every part of our body. And this was thought of impossible, but now it shows, and that is within the 10 years, I did more studies, and you did more different studies. We have to come together. We do this through this podcast now, and we have audience watching us or listening to us. It's very interesting that we are able to top-down regulate from our mind over our body, and it is unprecedented. The power of the mind, the unlimited power of the mind. They are talking so much about it, and what is it? Nobody knows. Hey, Professor Music states in a new book of Scott Carney. He's a New York Times bestseller. He's an anthropologist, and he is doing this method. He was to debunk me after you met me. Scott Carney came, the anthropologist, to debunk me. He is one of the greatest adepts and disciples who is analyzing completely through all the doctor visits, professors, experiments, research. And he got a Professor Music of psychiatry in Michigan saying Wim Hof has found the secret of placebo. So placebo is the power of the mind, but it is no longer something abstract. It is something anybody is able to learn to use within his own life. We are born to be happy, strong, and healthy, only we don't know how to tap into the hormonal system or the immune system or the metabolic processes in the cell. We don't know how to do that. And let me tell you, top-down regulation. It's there, Ray. and a ray of the sunshine. Cron ice. Cron ice. I'm going to...
There's ice in there. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's go on this. So let's talk about the other side where my work is, which has been at the mitochondrion, which is the power plant for every cell. This is how we generate that energy, generate the ATP, or generate, in some cases, the waste heat. And my start, I was doing something just like Wim. I was trying things, and I had an idea, but I didn't know why. And I met David Sinclair at TEDMed, and we talk a little bit about this on the podcast I did with David. But what David was saying is, Ray, what you're doing is much more powerful than thinking about weight loss or wasting calories. Recognize that these little power plants are at the center of the generation of energy. And in fact, what is important is that when we do dietary restriction without malnutrition with organisms, yeast and worms and mice and all the way up to primates, we see that there are similar issues between what's going on with these mild cold stress situations or contrast situations and what's going on in dietary restriction. And so I began researching that, and that's what Wim and I were talking about. I went down my channel of trying to find out a diet that allows one to implement this in a very simplistic way.
Very interesting.
Right? And what was really neat that came out of all of this is that even some of the experiments that were done with dietary restriction, they had to go back and look at the data because the temperature of the habitats where they were keeping the mice was unfortunately not consistent, and there was some element of this that was also relative to the cold. And so what we've now found, and what we ended up doing, is writing the metabolic winter hypothesis paper also in 2014, which is right when Wim was doing his stuff with autonomic control. So as we both moved along, I was looking at food and the small side, the cellular, each cell that makes up this system. And Wim was moving closer and closer to say, how can we control this system with our minds? And we all know that there are many animals. Like, for example, if you think about the monarch butterfly, which leaves down in Mexico from a cluster of trees, and then 3 or 4 generations later arrives back at that very spot. Think about that. We can't explain that, and we can't explain it, but it does really happen. It's happening, and somehow those monarch butterflies make that journey all the way up to Canada and back in 3 generations, and the butterfly that lands there on the tree that overwinters and then starts this process over in the next year never really had any instructions. Or if we think about birds, the fact that, a robin, which is a bird, never builds a cardinal's nest, or it never builds an eagle's nest. In other words, they don't go to bird nest school. Somehow this is programmed in to build a nest like this. The nest was already built when they were there. Now, there are examples where birds learn. I've watched robins right now in the back of my yard. There are these robins that are all young. Their mom is ready to get them on the road, and she's teaching. She runs around and she somehow finds worms. That in itself is fascinating, that she can find, hear, or whatever they do, vibration, feel. Somehow they find the words. And at first, the baby bird is just clamoring, give me a worm, give me a worm. But eventually that baby will learn to do it. So that's an example of biologically teaching, which is what Wim and I are trying to do through teaching food or teaching the mild cold stress. But this other thing, which is these innate abilities to withstand times of stress. The idea is that we are really reproduction machines. You can eat almost anything and reach at reproduction age at, say, 13 or 15 years. And then for the next 15 or 20 years, you're in reproductive prime. You're go, go, grow. This is all the people trying to win races and do CrossFit and really be extreme. Then there's the next 15 years of raising your younger offspring. Sometime around 45 or 50, Mother Nature is done with you. Evolution's done with you. There isn't a feedback loop because you've already passed on your genes. But at this point, here's the real question. How can we do things, and does nature have built into the blueprint times of cold, times of no food, what we call metabolic winter, cool, dark, still and scarce. Does Mother Nature have built into those genes coping mechanisms for a wonderful time, say metabolic summer, bright, warm, active, and abundant? Metabolic summer is about fecundity and reproduction. And does all organisms survive because during these times of what look to be high stress, our body goes into a protective mode? The idea that we're always in the fed state and we're always warm and we're always exercising, this is really profitable, and I'm not against any of those things. But just like the brain needs time of sleep, where the brain isn't dormant, the brain is consolidating memories, the brain is doing other things, so too Wim and I are doing on similar and opposite ends of this spectrum, from the mind all the way down to the cellular level, and from mild cold stress, which we share, to dietary restriction, which I'm doing with a whole food plant-based diet. Does this allow our bodies to go in this preservation mode? And will that expand our health span? These are the questions. And it's just magical to me that us sitting in the kitchen and doing all of what we did then together, and here we are almost a decade later, and our work is even more overlapped, even more connected, even more verified than we probably ever could have hoped for back then.
Exactly. Beautiful, beautiful. Good work you have done. I'm doing right now a study on the DNA with top researchers in San Francisco, UCSF, and they are really the best, and so they found out about this method. And it's only in time that people begin to take this on, because this shit works. So, and it is a great answer for the emptiness or for the questions of contemporary problems, which will not be solved by more vaccinations, more pills, more medicaments, or therapies, but by going into the human innate capacity to deal with stress through the mind and through, say, different lifestyles, as you were talking, dietary restriction, calorie restriction. It has been shown in mice. Mice just live a lot longer if they don't eat so much. Mm-hmm. And rats, talk a little bit about our social being. People should live more, share more, be more together, because loneliness in rats, in the research, it showed that the normal rat population, the females, they have 20% chance of benign breast cancer. But if you put if they live all together, then nothing happens. Then it stays benign and 20%. You put them on to become lonely, isolated, it becomes 80% and becomes malignant. That is emotion. Emotion has got a lot to do with who we are and what happens within our bodies. Now, what is emotion in the end? Is it happiness? Is it our searching for the soul, for the unexplained, for the more in our mind than what we learn? I think so. I think we humans, we are full of curiosity. If we are staying curious like a little child, then you are sane. You are neurologically growing and blooming inside of your own head, and that stays on until you die. Expanding consciousness is expanding neurology, perception. That is neurology, and that neurology now is being able to be in control of ours. And so the curiosity and the innate capacity of us to keep on growing, to keep on wondering, to keep on finding out there is more than meets the eye. And for God's sake, we got so much problems right now. Let's Let get on with some solutions. And we found them already, but we are sitting here because of staggering ignorance going on, suppressing our minds with stupid media and stupid schooling that doesn't allow through our beautiful curiosity to still our hunger for the mystery of the day, of the moment, of being here, of being alive, in love with it all, the emotion. All that has great influence upon our DNA. And because nobody's listening to this shit, that's why I go through science. I go through science right now with the top researchers on the DNA, and we are showing that through conscious will, we are able to ameliorate any condition within the cell related to the DNA, the telomeres, to bring it back even to the primal condition of the cell itself through cold exposure and breathing exercises to activate the heat shock, cold shock proteins who function like guards around the cell, by which the inflammatory markers are not able to enter, by which the oxidative stress is not able to enter. And we are exposed by inflammation and oxidative stress in our lifestyles all the time. And we have not activated our little guard around it, the cold and the heat shock proteins, and thus it enters into our cell. We are sort of surviving because we have to deal with our oxidative stress, with our inflammation. We have to survive in the cell. And it takes all the energy. And with that, it's not able to get into the genetical encrypted codes because it is surviving. When it is surviving, you are not painting. You're not into creativity and making your house neat and nice. Beautiful and full of expression. No, you are defending of the intrusion not coming in. That's what you do, and there goes the energy. And this is what is happening with all our cold things. They have come because we have found the lack in humans to not being able to protect themselves within the cell of this intrusion in a simple way. And this is what we bring. We bring it full of emotion. We bring it full of love with 2 feet on the ground, but because nobody is listening and everybody is mesmerized by stupid governments, stupid politics, stupid systems, and taking all our money and maintaining us in dependency. We people like us have to come up and stand up and show some guts. Show some, amen, here I am. I begin out of the unknown and I will get it known, because in the end, it's common sense, guys. It's common sense to be happy, strong, and healthy, and to be fully charged of that.
Yeah, and
the rest is bullshit.
And it's so important because, one of the biggest problems we have is once you have that experience base, you have to craft the language around it so that you can explain it to the other people. When you're experiencing something real hand, it's real. For example, when our clients are losing weight and they're losing at 0.6 to 0.8 pounds a day every single day, people can say whatever they want. They can call it starvation. They can call all this stuff. But what they can't change is this person's individual experience. This person is living in a way that they know this is absolutely true. It works. It's not a mystery. And when people come along with words, and this becomes a big problem, because one of the downsides of our increase in communication and the increase in people publishing and the increase in media and the increase of social media and the increase of all these experts is that people hijack language and words often and use them in ways that really aren't consistent with what are those sort of natural or environmental realities. And one of the problems you and I have shared along the way was finding the language and finding the ability not just to teach other people, going back to the the bird nest or whatever, teaching everyone or finding worms, but also going to the point of being able to communicate with the science world. So, for example, I went back to culinary school so that I could learn the language of food and I could translate what we knew about food and diet and health span onto the plate. Knowing that language is real, but again, we made up all that language too. There's really no such thing. Most of these things that exist are just made up. They're not at lizard brain biology, which is what we're tapping into. We're tapping into that fundamental survival instinct. And there are all these social rules and what's socially normal above us. And yet, there is the biology to reproduce, the biology to find food, the biology to go extended times. One of the things we talked about, and I went on to do a lot more research, up to 24 days with no food, when we were talking about fasting and a medically supervised water fast. Wim and I both want to say to everybody out there, you need to do these things supervised, especially if you're doing something that is on the extreme side. But our body does have coping mechanisms for times of no food. And it's not surprising that those coping mechanisms are related to the coping mechanisms of mild cold stress that Wim is talking about, because these are stresses of metabolic winter. These are stresses of the idea that during that time, food is lower and cold is lower. And also rest and relaxation, because when Wim's talking about a sound mind, he's also talking about a relaxed mind. And it doesn't do one any good to be stressed, shivering, and starving and miserable all winter. No. Mild cold stress, once you get to the point where you have reactivated that ability to tolerate it, there's no fear of the cold. It feels fine. It's cold. You can feel it still is cold, but it's there. Same with no food. Wim's done long-term fast too. There's just no problem. Once you get past the day or two, or for people like he and I that do it all the time, you don't even have to go through that adaptation period. It turns out that it's fine with no food. Now, is there a limit? No. Wim and I can't leave forever with no food, and Wim can't stay forever in cold. There is an energetic limit, and we both know that that's there. But that limit is so far away from where we normally put that limit, where someone has to eat every 2 hours. Somebody has to put a space heater under their desk because they're cold. Someone has to put on a coat, to be warm when it's just beautiful spring or fall time temperatures. This limit is so far away, and this is something we've really explored, isn't it? Just how do you push that limit lower and lower?
Yes, very fine speech. I love it. Thing is, how to make it practical for people. What we are talking about, you don't need to go into the extremes. I did Mount Everest to the death zone in my shorts, and I found myself lost in a whiteout over there. Mm-hmm. Or many other situations. I've gone into the extremes. Why? Because this simple and practical knowledge was not there.
Let's tell that story of Everest, because it's related to the barefoot run. And I know the backstory. I'm not sure how often you tell that. But this is a really good example of what both of us do responsibly. When you knew that you were in a situation, you reversed course. Tell them that story about Everest.
Everest was not so much the height which I achieved with everybody found wow, so high, and then in shorts, bare-chested on Everest and into the death zone. No, where I found my nemesis was at 18,000 feet. Suddenly, overcast, snow began. And there are no pathways over there. It's just rocks and ice and snow. And there I was in a whiteout in my shorts. And I had never been there before. And I had to find a place like kilometers away, like miles away. And I had no clue where to go. But the thing is, surprisingly, at that moment, didn't find myself in paranoia, no anxiety. I watched myself. Hey, I'm not paranoid. I'm not in anxiety. I actually feel light. I feel okay. What is this? So, what that is, at that moment, I just started to walk. And 3 hours later, I came into the advanced base camp at 20,000 feet. And there I was, and I had my experience. I shook. I had shaken hands with become friends with Mount Everest. The unknown was no longer at that moment of climbing Mount Everest because nobody did it before, and now I'm going to do it. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here exactly, but I'm going to do this. And at that moment there, in the whiteout, I found myself. I found a deeper physiology, a deeper mindedness, which is completely past our paradigm. It is something you don't find in books, but only when you challenge yourself, when you follow your gut, and then you get into situations, and there are the life's lessons. Everybody thinking that is not possible, you should not do this, etc. And you find them. You find them, and you find yourself completely ready to take them on, to receive them, and to gain natural wisdom. That's what I found right over there. And those moments, many of those moments, and this all relates to the power of our mind. They made us dependent on hospitals, on medicines, on pills, and this. But there is simple, practical knowledge that leads up to a much bigger extent of the power over our mind willfully to every individual in the world. Mm-hmm. And that should be taught. And for that, you and me, we are exploring outside of the trodden pathways. What is there more? Because somebody doesn't give us the right knowledge to control our happiness, strength, and health, guaranteed.
Right.
Because it should be guaranteed.
Yeah, I mean, we should have those lessons, and I wanted you to also go in further, because ultimately the reason you didn't go on is because did you not realize that an injury that you had sustained in your foot from?
Yes.
Yeah, tell that story.
Oh yeah, 3 months before. Yeah, 3 months before, I had run a half marathon beyond the polar circle, minus 20, even colder. And after 18 kilometers, I felt numbness in my left forefoot. And I still had to go run like 2 miles, 3 kilometers. And I did it. I did it anyway without my left under leg felt like a stick at that moment. But I kept on going, and I did it. And then the professors, dermatologists, they told, you have inflicted a cold injury with irreparable cell damage done. And that means in 3-4 months, you have to come back, you take all these medicines, and then the dead tissue will be cut away. And with that, a couple of toes, and the dead tissue, the necrosis, it will all come. It will take about 4 months. But that was in January, and in April I should be on Mount Everest because I had already gained all the money for the expedition. So that night, the same night of that dermatologist professor telling me all that, giving me all the big box of medicines to cure, or not to cure, but to treat my foot, which was going to be partly amputated in 4 months. I was walking through at 2 o'clock in the morning, stumbling. I mean, my foot was fully in bandage. I was like, through my house the way I could. but thinking. And then I decided I'm going to heal myself. I'm going to heal myself, and that's what I do. I'm going to treat it with cow balm, like grease. And the professor had told me, don't put grease on it. They're completely dry, and that's it. And I did the contrary. And I never, ever opened up the box full of pills, medicaments, whatever was in there. I never opened it. I returned it to the pharmacy. Here, you got the box. I don't need it. And I began to cure myself, to treat myself with cow balm every day. And my foot turned from, I don't know, all kinds of colors, from purple to green to blue to yellow to orange to red, and then to pink again. And then 2.5 months later, I went to Mount Everest. I was ready. But then climbing all the way up to the death zone in shorts, which I had no problem whatsoever to do that. In shorts, going up, no problem. But then my left forefoot played up, and I felt it. And I might be crazy, like going into the unknown and going climbing Mount Everest completely in my shorts and do the unknown and be a legend and all that. But I'm no idiot.
Right.
When I feel something that is not good and it's happening, I just turn. And I decided to turn, and I filmed the moment where I was at 7,500 feet, like 23,000 feet up, and I thought, look, there's the top. I'm not going to go. This is the roof of the world. This is the way it looks like. I'm here sitting in my shorts. I showed myself completely there, but I'm going back because my foot is playing up, and I know what it is. I have to go down. That's the right decision.
Right.
And everybody in the camp was disappointed because I went so fast up, and you decided to go back. Yeah, man, this is what it is. The craziness is good, but idiocy, no. Thank you very much.
Right. And so to kind of round all this out, one of the other really great stories you talked about was this passion for teaching youth and personally on climbing trees. What can climbing trees do for us in life?
Well, everything, really. If you see kids coming, and they come on these birthday parties, I had hundreds of them, like 100 times 10, 15 children. And after every climbing birthday party or climbing party, because sometimes it was not a birthday party, they always said, this was my best birthday ever. Yeah. This is what children want. And you know what happens? After they have done it all, they are just sitting there. They don't want to go to McDonald's. They eat their brown bread. They are sitting serene on the ground. They are fully grounded positively. And the elders, the parents, then look at them the way they never saw their child. Yeah. And that is because they have lived. They have extended their fears. They have gained mobility. They have gained neurology insight. And they are kind of positively exhausted. That makes them serene, working out their new neurology, their new mobility, their new transcending fear, going faster, different perception, and all that. And then so loose and so nice. That is what children miss upon. Our new generations, they are becoming a lot depressed because pressure, there's no pressure inside. There is no neurological pressure, which is related directly into a decreasing serotonin uptake or dopamine, or no connection with the euphoric cannabinoids of the the periaqueductal, they are not into the survival mechanism, the brainstem. They should expose. Trees are alive. Rocks are alive. It's there for the climbing. We should stimulate our physiology because it is our mind which we stimulate. For any parent, better get your child back into nature because you get a peaceful child back who is full of gratitude that you took him.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. It's a great way to bring this to the close. And right now with my son Danner, I talked to you earlier last week. We talked a little bit, but about the idea that he's taking this abandoned shed and converting it into a tiny house up in the hills of Tennessee, the 22 acres we have up there. And there are a ton of trees there. So I can't wait until you visit the United States again and get close, and maybe all of us can go climb some trees. It would be just really wonderful to see you again. So, Wim, thank you so much for joining us today. And let's try to, over this next decade, let's just try to take this even further. I don't think anyone really could have seen all the progress. Certainly, I don't think either one of us could have imagined that so many more things would have been accepted by science and tested. But we certainly had the tenacity and the perseverance to challenge status quo a little bit, and I think the results speak for themselves.
Yes, and I love your speech, and you have also gone through, the tenacity. I like the word, and I liked some more of these words of you. I was listening to it. It's music, man. It's music, and we are living the life. So Alabama, I will come sometime and hang out together. And we just keep on because we love life, and we will keep on challenging the unknown.
So, Wim, where can people find you, and can you tell us a little bit about your new book coming out?
There's not only a new book. Next year, they make a full feature film in Hollywood about my life. And that is great marketing, because my mission is to bring out, to make accessible what we have been spoken about. A practical, a very strong inner medicine, inner power, mental power, physical power, and it's all there for the take. And it's simple. You don't need to go do straight things and extreme things to get to know to your innate capacity, which is much more than we thought possible. So it'll come out through a film, will come out through a book, the Wim Hof Method. Wim Hof Method. That is, it's carrying my name. It wasn't even me who put the name there. They put it there. Hey, nice, okay. As long as the mission is served, you can do anything. I always say, you can use me, you can abuse me, just serve the mission. And the mission is to make everybody happy, strong, and healthy as an option. There's no dogma behind it. So if you want to find out more about this, go to the Wim Hof Method.com and then find out through the free app, which we are developing all the time, to pass it on, because we think healthcare, mental health care, all that, and what your capacity is, should be available for every person in the world. That's our mission.
Thank you, Wim.
Right on. Ray, thank you.
I love that guy. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Thank you for joining me on this plant-based path to good health. It's always the food for your mind and body. So remember, keep eating right.
Thank you for listening to Science and Saucer. For more details about the content in today's show, or to contact Ray, please visit us at healthspansolution.com.
Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life. Couldn't get better, should have been much worse. Welcome to the last road on the right of your life. Was paved with good intentions, hoping this is not wish you were.